second chance in power. And President Biden and his electoral advisors can't figure out how to or don't want to implement policies or campaigns that win the enthusiastic support of working class voters, young people, and people of color, despite the threat of a fascist regime under Trump. And in this morass, what strategies can the progressives of Massachusetts embrace that give us the best chance of increasing our power in 2024? That's the subject of today's conference. We're going to start with Nina Turner, who you know, a former legislator in her native Ohio and a spokesperson for many years for Bernie Sanders in his presidential campaign. And following Nina, the first panel will address the impact of military spending and budget priorities in the nation on campaigns and issues within the state. We'll then hear from our state auditor, Diana DeZoglio, who is taking on the conservative leadership of the Democratic Party to bring some transparency to the legislative process. Just before noon, we'll have the first of our two breakout sessions. And if you still have in your calendar that breakouts begin at 11:30, note that we have moved that start to 11:50 to accommodate the auditor's schedule. After a lunch break, we'll hear from Congressman Max Frost. He's from Florida and is the youngest member of the squad. In our second panel this afternoon, we'll learn how progressives won 3 major statewide issue campaigns. That's unusual, so we should learn from those campaigns. After a second round of breakouts, our third panel will propose strategies to combat 3 big challenges to progressive struggles in 2024. To end the day, we'll hear what Max Elbaum, an experienced and effective organizer in the peace movement, thinks we can and should do to bring the Gaza protest momentum into the 2024 political arena. That's all a demanding schedule, but we hope the day's work is useful to you. You should know that the conference is sponsored by the Massachusetts Progressive Action Organizing Committee, which is a coalition of organizations, including Mass Peace Action, the North American Indian Center of Boston, Our Revolution Massachusetts, Progressive Dems of America, Progressive Mass, and over a dozen consulting organizations. To join MPAOC, your organization can send a message to me via the chat, and there'll be more about that later. And so let's see if there are more people signing in. Russell, you about ready to introduce yourself before introducing our plenary speaker, Nina Turner? She's been
Yes, I am, Henry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm hoping that Nina's on. Her assistant said that she would be on.
She's not on, Russell.
She's not on.
Just talk very slowly.
I'm going to
Russell.
speak very, very slowly in the hopes that her assistant Allison said that had spoken to her this morning and that she would be on momentarily. So I am going to speak like the slow talkers of America in the hopes that she will be on by the time I am done. Good morning, everyone. I am Russell Friedman, State Coordinator of Progressive Democrats of America, and I'm particularly delighted to have the opportunity to introduce former national chairperson for Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign for president and former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner. Nina is a two-time candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives from Ohio. As a candidate, she directly experienced a number of obstacles from neoliberal Democrats and corporate and conservative interests, which vehemently attacked her candidacy. Her experience and perspective on working to overcome these challenges hold instructive lessons for all of us. Senator Turner is currently head of We Are Somebody, a capacity building organization for the working class, particularly geared towards amplifying the work of labor unions and supporting striking workers. We enthusiastically welcome Nina as a keynote of our 2023 MPAOC conference. She's a dynamic and inspirational speaker, as well as an experienced organizer. After Senator Turner speaks, there'll be an opportunity for questions. Please put them in the chat, and Henry will ask them. So is Nina on?
Nope.
Nope.
Hey, Russell. It's
Yes.
Alan here. I just spoke with Nina and she's jumping on. You guys are a little ahead of schedule, so she's getting on as soon as she can.
Oh, all right.
So while we're waiting, if people who have gotten on in the last few minutes could just put their name in the chat, indicate where you're calling in from, and either an organization that you're active with and or an issue that particularly concerns you. If you could share that with others on this call, that would be fantastic. And just as we're getting to know one another, Nina will be checking in and getting on the Zoom. She's not scheduled until 9:50, so
She has entered the waiting room, so.
Okay.
okay. So Matthew from Cambridge, another OR colleague, and Bob in Beverly, Subrata in Boston, Judy from Greenfield, Kathy, another colleague from Cambridge, Frank from Pittsfield. Do we have anyone further west than Pittsfield? That's getting up against the edge. Dee from Lowell, Jane in Ashland.
Henry, I see that Nina has joined us. Nina, you missed my spellbinding introduction. I am sorry, but it is good to see you. The first time I heard you speak was at the Nurses Convention out in Chicago. That was 2 or 3 years ago, and we are delighted to have you join us here this morning. So without further ado, as they say, the proverbial virtual floor is yours. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Russell, so much. My apologies. I got to go back and roll the tape to hear that spellbinding. I appreciate you guys so much. You're so efficient. You're ahead of time. So here we are. And many thanks to Allie and also Alan, who made me know, get in there, they're ready for you. So here I am. So glad to be with you all virtually. I wish we could be all in the same space physically. There's something about having the energy of a physical presence. But thank goodness we live in a time where we can gather virtually. 50 years ago, this was not even a thing, but now it is a thing, and we are utilizing the tools at our disposal. To the Massachusetts Peace Action, to the leaders, to the members, to the family, the frenemies, and the friends who are gathered here with us this morning. I thank you so much for being here and for using your time, your talent, and your treasure to be on the right side of justice. We often think about justice as if it is this pretty picture. We're fighting for justice. And while the notion of achieving justice itself is very beautiful, getting there is very messy. We know throughout human history, but especially in America, what we know as the United States of America, the path to justice has not been beautiful. It has been bloody. It has been painful. People have hurt. It has caused hurt. Even people have died fighting for this thing called justice, from the founding of this country to one of the most horrific things that this country has ever done, even before its founding, and that is the enslavement of Africans and then their descendants. So fighting for justice is not a beautiful thing, but getting to justice is. And so I want all of you to know that it is not a destination. It is in fact a journey. And I think, Mass, you understand that very clearly, which is why you continue to fight. I was looking at some of the things that you have posted on your website about how the state of Massachusetts is seen as a very progressive place, but in reality, you have leadership that doesn't listen, and the forces that have the people's power is not necessarily moving in the direction of the people. And that is not only true for your state, it is true for the United States of America. As we look at what is happening in the Middle East by way of most recent example, we know that the majority of Americans, no matter how they fall on the political spectrum, want peace. They want peace. They're crying out for peace. But yet those who are in power, and it is Democrats who are in power in this administration, are not going in that direction. We know that the majority of the American people want universal health care. They want paid family medical leave. Insert our great platform, and you will see that the majority of the American people are right where we are. So I want you all to know that it is not us who are the radicals. It is the people and the leaders and the forces that are not in line with what the majority of the people of this country want, no matter if they're Democrat, Republican, progressive, neoliberal, a little country, a little rock and roll, a little R&B. It doesn't matter how people fall. When you talk to them about the issues that animate their lives, they are in line with what our movement is pushing for. So I was thinking, what can I say to the Massachusetts Peace Action Group? I want to both edify and lift you, but also to let you know that our work is not complete. Just like our foremothers and forefathers who came before us, those who had a mind to fight for justice in their time, their work was never done. They just passed the baton to us. And so our work is not done as we ready ourselves to advance justice in all of its forms, whether it is social, political, economic, or environmental. It is our job to push for justice. I think about my track days, and Alan has heard me tell this story. I used to run track in high school, and I was pretty fast. I was the first leg of the 440 relay. And I'm using this as my example because I want you to visualize people running track. Let's think about the Olympics. I'm sure most of us have watched the Olympics. And if you watch track and field, you know that there's a race called the 440 relay. I was the first leg of the 440 relay in high school. And to be the first leg, it means that you are fast. The goal of the first leg of the relay is to set the pace, is to get the lead for the team. The key word is the team. We are the team. The legs are playing a role. So the first leg gets the lead for their team. They pass the baton to the second leg of the race, and their job is to keep the lead and advance that lead. keep the lead and advance that lead. As the second leg of the relay race passes the baton to the third leg, the mission is still the same. It is to keep the lead, but then advance the lead. And then you pass the baton to the anchor, and the timing has to be just right. Because if it's too fast or too slow, the baton could drop, and then you have to pick it up and start all over again in terms of regaining the lead. So timing is everything too. And then as that baton is passed from the third leg of that 440 relay to the anchor's job is to not only keep the lead, not only to advance the lead, but to bring it on home. That is the work for progressives like us, not just in this country, but all over the world. Whatever leg of the race you deem yourself as running, you have a role to play. The only thing, though, in the life of, in the 440 relay of life, we never stop trying to keep the lead, trying to advance the lead, and trying to bring it on home. So whether we look at that in terms of civil rights or women's rights or gay rights or environmental rights, insert your right, the goal is to advance the lead in the areas of politics, of social, of society, and all of its forms, and to advance it. See, it's not enough to keep it, we got to advance it. And just as there are spirits like ours who are very animated about advancing, keeping the lead and advancing the lead, there's an opposite force. Remember what we learned in science. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I think that those of us who are on the side of justice, we often think that the other side is just going to sit back and say, oh yeah, they're right. We should have universal health care in this country so that every single American does not have to worry about going broke to try to stay healthy. That's a good thing. We often think that now that we know what the fossil fuel industry is doing and has done, we should be on the right side of justice and try to advance ourselves as a nation and as a world to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels and make renewable energy the thing to do, because we already know the impact that oil and gas has on the environment. And although we just can't stop the car like that, we should be working towards a time in human history that we do not rely on fossil fuels. We're thinking to ourselves, why don't people get that? We're thinking to ourselves in the legal system, now that we know that the system itself is inherently racist and anti-Black and does not have a class consciousness within it. My God, we should be pushing laws to correct the wrongs in this country and to advance the good. We're thinking as progressives, that makes a whole lot of sense. We're also thinking that why wouldn't we be on the side of the labor movement, that it is not good that there's a 399-to-1 ratio between CEO pay and worker pay, that kind of imbalance is not good. We're thinking to ourselves, who could be against that? But I want you to know, sisters and brothers, family and friends, and even frenemies, that just as we are pushing for justice, as the generations before us and some generations that are still walking the face of this earth, as they push for justice, there was an opposite and equal force pushing against them. And sometimes those forces look like the people in this room. Sometimes those forces have D's behind their names. But I want to tell you something. This is not about the D in Democrat. This is about the D in deeds. DEEDS. See, I care more about your deeds than your political affiliation. And Massachusetts, you know all too well that you got a whole lot of D's, but their deeds don't mean a damn thing, because they are not fighting for and standing up for what is just, what is right, and what is good. Now, in this moment, I'm not going to leave the Republicans out, because they could be and they should be doing a whole lot better than what they are doing now. And in mass in states all across this country, and even in the Congress, we see so many of them be pro-birth, but not pro-life. But then what is the excuse for the Democrats? That's what I'm trying to understand. Working class people all over this country, they need one of these two parties since we are stuck with two for now. I hope there comes a day when we have that there's an omnipartisanship going, that there are many political parties in the United States of America, because it is absolutely asinine on its face to have two political parties to deal with over 300 million people in this country. But here we are. I want to put that in the parking lot. The working class people of this country of all backgrounds need one of these two parties to stand up unequivocally and unabashed for the quality of life for the people in this country and not be ashamed to do it. They need leaders who understand that what happens over there, and over there is the Middle East. Over there is the continent of Africa. Over there is the Ukraine. Over there is Haiti. What happens over there happens over here, and we cannot divorce ourselves from the pain and the pressure that people are feeling all over this world, mainly at the hands of an American empire, to quote the great Dr. Cornel West, and other colonial forces whose will we can see being done throughout the land in ways that disadvantages poor people all over the world. What happens over there happens over here. And so, brothers and sisters, family and friends and frenemies, for you in this movement, our job is to advance the lead, to keep the lead, to advance the lead, and to bring it on home. And that's why I am so just absolutely feeling blessed to be in your presence. So Russell, I'm all off my notes. I didn't even, I had written a speech. Allie gave me plenty of prep time, and as I often do, I just kind of go where the Spirit leads me. So I jotted down a few notes as I wrap this thing up, because I know we're going to have some Q&A, but I'm feeling this today, and I cannot wait to be on the road with you all. I'm coming to Massachusetts. I'm coming to many states next year, and my goal, I'm getting back on the road, baby. We're going to lift up this movement. We're going to recapture the feeling that we felt when Senator Bernard Sanders challenged the status quo in 2016. We're going to stir that back up, Russell. We're going to do that thing all over again, because our work is not done. And as a movement, they continue to push back on us. But I want to remind us that while personalities are a beautiful thing, we cannot put all of our hopes and all of the weight, quite frankly, on one personality. This movement, the resurgence of the progressive movement in the 21st century, we definitely owe a lot of thanks to Senator Bernard Sanders, but it is us too. It is not me, right? Remember that? It is not me, it is us. And so it is our job, no matter what generation we are from. If we are walking the face of this earth, we have a moral obligation to push for the lead, to keep the lead, and to advance the lead of justice. It's on us. And so leaders like myself and like the senator and so many others and people with fancy titles, I often say that titles are good. I got a whole bunch of titles, and because of that, I do get my phone calls returned. Titles are good, but purpose is better. What the hell do we care about people with fancy titles when they deny the American people what they need to not just survive, but to thrive? What the hell good is a title when people are not willing to make the requisite demand that power bends to the will and to the needs of the people in this nation and in this world? I don't care about those titles if people are not going to stand up for what is just, for what is right, and for what is good. I'm a hell-raising humanitarian. So let me do this. I just three things I wanted to say to you, besides all the things that I said that were not in my notes. I am a preacher's kid. My mother was a preacher. She is no longer on this plane of existence. Miss her every single day. I am a preacher's kid. And my mother made my siblings and I go to church 8 days a week. I'm sure I got some amens in the house on that. 8 days a week, my mother did. And there is a scripture in the Christian Bible. I'm shouting out to people of all faith and then people of no faith at all. But this is it. This is my ground. And there's a scripture that talks about being steadfast. Be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the works of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain. Massachusetts Peace Action, my message today is a spiritual one, that I want you to be steadfast and unmovable, abounding in goodness and in justice, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain. Just as the people who laid a path for us to be where we are today and to have that spirit that we're going to fight and push for justice, we know they knew that their labor was not in vain. I want you to know that your labor is not in vain, even though you are bucking up against a system that thinks that it will not bend, but eventually it will, because we're not going to give up. We're not going to give out. We're not going anywhere. So be steadfast is my first message to you today. The second one is coming from Brother James Baldwin, one of the greatest novelists of the 20th century. And this is on me all the time. And he said this. He said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And we have to have the willingness to face the challenges that are before us today. That there are millions of people in this country who have no health care. There are millions of people in this country who don't have a roof over their head. There are millions of children in this country who go to bed hungry at night. There are millions who have fallen victim to a legal system that is unjust and that is anti-Black. There are millions of people in this country who live in communities where environmental justice does not exist. There are millions of people in this country among the working class who are standing up, fighting for better wages and work conditions. There are millions of people in this country who are suffering disproportionately in hoods all over this country, whether those hoods are urban, rural, or suburban. And it is our job, progressives, to stand up against the forces that will dare deny our sisters and brothers the opportunity to not just survive every damn day. Who wants to live and survive every day of their lives? We want to get people to thrive. We want to follow Maslow's hierarchy of needs and create pathways of opportunity for the greatest majority of people in this country and then in the world to get to self-actualization. Why should that only be for people who are the ultra wealthy? It should be a path that everybody can take, that everybody can venture on. And that is why the essence of our spirit and our fight is necessary. Be steadfast and unmovable. And then to know what Brother James Baldwin said, that everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Are we ready to face what lies before us on this day and in the days to come? And then lastly, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the uses of power. And I gotta thank Brother Norm Solomon who for drilling this particular quote in my head, because progressives, we often forget that we got to get the power. It's not enough to be right on the issues without having the power. We need power, and we should not be afraid of gaining the power. How do we gain the power? We gain the power from an activist perspective. Not everybody got to have a special elected title, but we do need people with those special titles who understand their purpose and who do not cave once we get them in office, because we have no use for them if they cave once they get into office. And we got to make sure that we gain that power to use it for good. But this is what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had to say about power, and I'm going to end on this. He said, power without love is reckless. And we're seeing that right now before our eyes in real time, how reckless it is. Even before the war in the Middle East, it is reckless to have power without love. It is the kind of recklessness that will deny the enhanced child tax credit. Hello, I'm old enough to remember that. It is the kind of recklessness that will deny the rail workers the opportunity to strike for better wages and benefits and work conditions, et cetera, et cetera. Fill in the blank. Power without love is reckless and abusive. And we see those abuses playing out in real time in our lives in this country and in the world. He went on to say, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Progressives, that's my message to you. I want us to underline, bold that, underscore that. Yeah, we got the love, but we got to get the power. Because without the power, we can't make the change. Hello, somebody. Dr. King said, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice makes a demand. Justice don't come in and beg folks. Justice comes in, barreling in, kicking the door in, and it makes a demand. Progressives, are we willing to make the requisite demands that are necessary so that people can thrive in this country and not just survive in this country? Now, Dr. King went on to marry those two things together, that we need both love and power so that they can play out together in this magnificent symphony. I'm putting a Turnerism on Dr. King's quote. And for those of you who understand the workings of the orchestra, if you've ever been to a concert where you have an orchestra playing and every instrument matters, and that beautiful symphony cannot happen unless every single instrument is playing its role. I want us to see ourselves as those instruments. You see, we are instruments for justice in all of its forms. And that we understand as a movement how we must marry love and power and make the requisite demands and be willing to push the consequences when people who have power refuse to use it. So be steadfast and immovable. Know that everything that is faced might not necessarily be changed, but we can't change it until we're willing to face it. And lastly, be willing to use love and power as vehicles to get to that justice. So that is it for me. I could keep going on and on because I'm feeling something right now this morning. I don't know if you're feeling it this morning, but I'm feeling it this morning. I done preached myself happy this morning. And Russell, I'm ready to answer any questions or to go into a dialogue again. I count it all joy to be among this august body on this day, in December of 2023, and let us ready ourselves to go even stronger into the battle in 2024.
Nina, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Henry. I hope there are a couple of questions at least, and then we'll have to move on with the program. But you are inspirational as always, and it's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming today. Henry?
Fantastic, Nina. And put your questions in the chat. Otherwise, we can't deal with them. And I just want to say, Nina, the last time I heard you, you were on a national Zoom with Progressive Dems, and there was a Q&A session. And people, this is true, people stayed on that Q&A for 2.5 hours with Nina. It was unbelievable, and they would have gone on longer. But anyway, so I'm going to start off with taking off from one of the questions, and it's this. We know going into 2024, we have Trump promising to deliver a fascist new government, and we have Biden spinning his wheels, unpopular, and with the Democratic Party unable to find their way to enact the measures that inspire people, working class people, young people, people of color. What do you suggest is the best option as we go into 2024 for progressive people?
Wow.
A simple one to get this done.
Nothing too hard. Well, I love how the person who formed the question laid it out on both sides of this. So we're basically fighting neo-fascism and neoliberalism. I happen to believe that neoliberalism breeds neo-fascism. If we look at with a critical eye what happened in 2016 and why Trump, many reasons, but a major reason why Trump was able to gain and also win is because of neoliberal policies had laid the path for it. That didn't happen overnight. Creating an environment where a Trump-like personality could take over this country as president didn't happen overnight. So we cannot forget the history of what got us to this particular moment. And it was neoliberalism. It was not taking care of the needs of working class people. And I mean working class people, because let me just be just embrace. A lot of times when we say working class people, think of just white folks. Let me just say that I'm talking about working class people from all backgrounds, right? Who are sick and tired, in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, of being sick and tired. And what Trump offered with his faux populism, he said he was going to drain the swamp. Now, as my friend Charlemagne God said, he deluded people because he's the swamp thing. But he said he was going to drain the swamp, and he talked about the trade deals, and he talked about the types of neoliberal policies that got us to where we were. And he had the type of bravado, but it was all a fake. It was all phony. But people, in when there's a vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum. Somebody has to fill it, and he filled it at that time because he spoke against the machine. That is what made him so attractive. He went against the status quo. So for us as progressives, we have got to continue to remind people of the dangers of neo-fascism. I often say neo-fascism kills you quick. Neoliberalism kills you slow. In some ways, if we're dying slowly, we might have a chance to be resuscitated, right? If we're going quick, that might not happen. The whole nature of the whole concept of the lesser of two evils is still evil. That is absolutely true. And I think that we are at a moment in our country's history that people may just go for straight up evil. So President Donald J. Trump is a threat. The neoliberals of the Democratic Party don't get it. They think that all they can do, they think they're going to win in 2020 or 2024 in the way that they won in 2020, which is to make Donald J. Trump the poster child. Well, newsflash, Donald J. Trump is not in office right now. And so it's going to be hard to pull that off again. As progressives, we got to put forth the vision that is necessary to provide provision for the people. And we have to do that both from we need an inside-outside game. We got to have activist class on the outside, and then we got to get people elected who, when they get there, they're not going to forget what it is they were sent there to do. And it is the synergy of those two things. I wish I had an easier answer than that, but it's not going to be an easy path. And then we can't fall so in love with the people that we put in office that we don't challenge them when they are not doing what they said they were going to do in terms of using power and love in a way that edifies the people in this country. So inside outside game progressives, that is what we have to do to be able to challenge this. And then, quite frankly, if the Democratic Party continues the course that it is on, and just denying that the people who want to see Mr. Trump become president again, they're more animated. If they keep denying that, Trump will be president again, progressive. So there's some things that we can do on the local, regional, and state levels of government. I'm not saying give up on the federal level, but if Democrats don't get a clue, Trump will be president again.
Okay. So, Nina, can you tell us a little about your new organization and how that fits into the political and organizing landscape as we go into 2024?
Wow, thank you for that question. So We Are Somebody is a capacity building organization for working class people, both union and non-union folks. The majority of Americans are not in unions. We want to absolutely change that. They should not be left on the wayside just because they are not in a union, and just seeing that need. My vision for this draws upon what has happened in the past in the labor movement with people like Fannie Lou Hamer, and of course the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was with sanitation workers, before he was assassinated, to what is happening in present time. It was the coal miners in Alabama who went on strike for almost 2 years, really trying to fight the machine to get what they deserved. And people who had the power did not give them the time and the attention that they needed. And they ended up having to go back after being on strike for almost 2 years without the type of contract that they deserved. And it was really their grit and their fight that gave me the idea to create We Are Somebody. So coupled with I often move based on the past, the present, and the future. And in the present, it was really their courage that motivated me. And that's when I really found out about a strike fund. I didn't know anything about a strike fund until I started to follow their journey. And they had a strike fund. They had a pretty strong strike fund. But the man or the woman, so to speak, walked them down. In other words, waited them out until they depleted their strike fund. And then they had to go back when they lost their leverage. They lost leverage. And so We Are Somebody is an organization to amplify, to organize, and to fund, and to help workers have their leverage. And then ultimately, my vision for We Are Somebody is to have a multi-million-dollar strike fund. There's never been an organization quite like this in the private side. That is our goal. And so we're having collaboration with groups like PDA, Progressive Democrats for America, One Fair Wage. There are going to be 13, there are going to be ballot initiatives and legislative movements all over this country in 2024 in 13 states to try to get workers to vote themselves a raise. One Fair Wage is trying to do away with the sub minimum wage. And so if you've never heard of One Fair Wage, I invite you to go look them up. They are absolutely spectacular. Saru, who runs that organization, is a wonderful leader. So we are going to be in fellowship or collaboration with progressive groups. PDA is one of those. One Fair Wage is another. And then on the other side of that, we have a portal on our website. So go to wearesomebody.org and join this fight. Give some money for the mission because we need it. And we're going to help to organize and fund and amplify working class people all over this country. We're about 2 months old now, and I am so excited about this journey, but we can't do it without you. So join us.
All right. Thank you, Nina. Let me bridge a couple of elements here. So one of the interesting aspects of the labor movement over the last few years has been the fact that people who work at colleges, universities, and then young people in Starbucks, Amazon, there's been a real shift. And, sometimes I think the new slogan is postdoctoral fellows of the world unite, but it's really interesting. So how do you see this new surge in the labor movement coming at this time, and how does it relate to the traditional labor movement, and what does it mean for the next few years?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. When I think about what's happening right now and how younger people and even seasoned people, but younger people in particular who are really standing up. Again, as I said, this didn't happen overnight. They are drawn upon the giants that came before them. Asa Philip Randolph comes to mind, one of the greatest trade unionists of the 21st century, that talked about, making a demand and that people deserve what people deserve, that we got to push and fight, led the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Mother Jones comes to mind, that trailblazing. I will fight like hell for the living. I pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living. And in her time, she bucked against the system. One of my favorite stories from her is when she asked somebody how they came to be in prison, to be locked up, and they said they had stolen some shoes. And she said to them, had you stolen a railroad, you'd be a United States senator. So we need plain speaking people like the Mother Jones. That's us. That's everybody in this room. Pick your giant. Pick the person who is your muse from history or even walking the earth right now. It is everyday people putting a little extra on their ordinary. And that's really what is happening in this movement. But today's movement didn't just come out of thin air. It is drawn upon the movements that came before it. And that is a beautiful thing. And what we have as a tool that some of our forefathers and foremothers did not have is what we're able to do right now, gather from all over the world through a Zoom, to be able to get our messages out through social media and just touch people millions and thousands of miles away. So the beauty of this movement is to be able to use those tools and make it known to people all around the world what is popping. And we must continue to uplift that. Solidarity Summer is now Solidarity Winter, which is going to turn into Solidarity Spring, which is going to turn into Solidarity Summer all over again. This ain't going anywhere. And another reason why this moment is so important, again, I want to go back to 2016. The pop off of the 21st century version of the progressive movement set in play the environment for labor to do what it's doing. Let me shout out Brother Sean Fain. Baby, that's my spirit. That's my spirit person right there on the labor side, or Sarah Nelson, so many others. But I'm just throwing it out there because Brother Sean Fain made it be known, and we need to take a page out of his book. They did not endorse. Hello, somebody. They didn't endorse. They said we ain't endorsing. No, we're not endorsing anybody that's not standing up for labor. Forced President Biden to go see them. I wish more labor leaders had that kind of grit. The UAW just came out and said we want to cease fire. I wish more labor leaders had that kind of moral, intestinal fortitude to speak a type of truth. And I worry about what the fallout is going to be, because when you are on the side of justice, ultimately you will be proven right. So this resurgence of the labor movement, because it's not new. Workers in this country from time immemorial have been fighting for better wages, better work conditions, and better benefits. This is not new. But this movement is standing on that foundation, and it has a whole bunch of other tools in its toolbox that generations before it did not have. And so I'm excited about this. I don't know about you, Massachusetts. Y'all, we all need to be excited about what is in store for us in 2024. It's gonna be a lot of work, but we're ready to do it.
All right, so let's talk some very practical politics, Nina. And I'm asking from your experience in Ohio and elsewhere, how do you see the working relationship between the local political campaigns, those ordinary city council campaigns, school committee campaigns, and then the bigger campaigns for president, senator? How do you see those linking up? And the reason I ask is too often, I think even people who are progressives are focused on the big campaigns and think the small campaigns are for somebody else. And then all of a sudden that somebody else is the Tea Party and we're squeezed out.
Yeah, great question. All campaigns are big campaigns, Henry. And for me, I come from the local level of government. You know, I served a mayor before I became a city council woman. I worked in the state Senate before I became a senator. I worked for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. You know, I've been in I've been blessed to have this public servant career that has really opened my eyes. So your point is well taken. We got to look at all elections as big elections. Two of the hardest jobs I've ever had was to work for a mayor and to become a Cleveland City Councilwoman myself, because you can't hide away. This ain't about, policy in terms of the theoretical uses of policy. You see every day that there's real flesh and blood attached to every policy. You go to the grocery store and people know your name. You're at the doctor's office, people know your name. You at a funeral and people know your name. The local level of government is the most important level of government. Now, mainstream media might not cover who's on council or who's on the regional level of government and even the state level of government. But those folks on those level of government are the most important. They are more important than who's in Congress, because their policy positions have real-time consequences and or impact on people every single day. So Henry, that is a magnificent question. We should not get seduced. I one time said, don't get seduced by the donuts and water. I have to tell y'all that story at another time, but Allie knows what I'm talking about. You can't get seduced by the shiny object that is the Congress and that is the presidency. as progressives, from a practical point, Henry, from just a tactical point of view, we need to pour more of our energy into local and regional levels of government because it takes a lot less to get a whole lot more. And your question triggered me to say something I forgot to say about We Are Somebody. One of the reasons why I created We Are Somebody, because as a movement, we have been deflated when it comes to electoral politics. Because the neoliberal class that has been at this a lot longer than we have in the resurgence of the progressive movement, they maneuver in ways that attempt to crush the progressive movement. They will come and try to crush a progressive before they will crush a Republican. Hello, somebody? So one of the reasons why an organization like We Are Somebody is so important, because what I'm saying to my progressive sisters and brothers and family and friends and frenemies is that we don't have to wait for somebody special to be elected to office to be able to make the change. That is why the modern resurgence of the 21st century union movement, labor movement, is so important, because what people like me are saying, or Sarah Nelson is saying, or Sean Fain is saying, or Christian Smalls is saying, we make the changes. We ain't got to wait for somebody with a fancy title or beg them to make the change. So that is another reason why We Are Somebody is so vitally important. But Henry, to go back to your point, don't get dazzled and seduced by the shiny object. The most important level of government is local. And if we can start to make movement in local government coupled with the labor movement, we're unstoppable. So don't get that. And no campaign, no office is too small. And then lastly on that point, we got to stop saying to ourselves off-year elections. There's no such thing as an off-year election. There's an election every single year. Somebody gonna have some type of power every single year, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's on the regional level, whether it's city council, school boards, somebody gonna have that power. So how do we dare then say that the presidency and the Congress is more important than who's your mayor and who's your governor and who's in your state legislatures? It's not more important. Let's go ahead and tune in to this great state of Florida. You have the people who put an initiative on the ballot to give returning citizens the power to regain their the vote. And then you got that flim-flam of a governor, DeSantis, who then uses the power to undo the will of the people. That's just one example of many that we can give. So state legislatures matter, governors' mansions matter, mayors' offices matter, city councils matter. And there is no off-year election. There are odd number year elections, there are even year elections, but every single election cycle matters. And we can see quicker and deeper wins if we focus on the local levels of government and also doing what we're doing in the union space. There's an African proverb that says that many hands make for light work. So we have organizations that are purely focused on the federal level. Okay, good for them. But all of us don't have to focus on the federal level of government. We need some hands focusing on the local level. We need some hands focusing on regional and state and so on and so on. We need some hands in the environmental justice space. We need some hands in the civil rights space. We need some hands in the unionist space. You see the picture that I'm painting, sisters and brothers? This is it. Many hands make for light work. No such thing, Henry, as a small election. And you're right. We get seduced by that just because mainstream media. We shouldn't follow mainstream media when it comes to matters that are important to making the changes that we need to have happen.
So Nina, I can't thank you enough for launching us into this day of work. And I want to be the first volunteer, and I'm looking at 100 potential volunteers for a campaign to bring you here to Massachusetts for an in-person meeting where we all expect to be inspired and get to work and after hearing from you again and interacting one-to-one with you. So thank you again, Nina, for getting us started.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to transition, Russell, and we're going to have our first plenary panel, and that's going to be chaired by Representative Carol Doherty. And I see her there. And Carol, the microphone is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And I am, and I know everyone here is truly inspired by Nina's presentation, her words and her words of encouragement. It takes that kind of enthusiasm and motivation to inspire us to continue on, no matter how difficult the challenges are, no matter how long the battle might be. So it is, thank you very much, Nina, if you're still there. So I have the pleasure once again to moderate a panel, the panel number 1, focusing on social and economic consequences in the Commonwealth in Massachusetts of excess military spending. The panel will be made up of 3 activists who organize themselves and agitate for the social and economic needs of the people of Massachusetts, and they will speak on how the Pentagon budget is starving state and local budgets. So before I introduce the panel, there are some rules. Each of the panelists will have 10 minutes to present. The remaining time in the hour that is available to us until 11:30, when our auditor, Diane DeZoglio, will be the speaker, to ask questions. And so I would ask you to use the raise hand function if you wish to ask a question. And I'm going to try very hard to keep track of who's, I guess the system now puts people in their proper order. So first up, best dressed, as my mother used to say. So and I'm also, Cole, do you have that Pentagon budget pie chart somewhere?
Yeah, I got it, but I got it. Let's for a second. I'll get it right up.
Looking for that. My own history in fighting the good fight is early on as with the Jobs with Peace campaign, which Jonathan King headed up along with many others. I participated there for many years, and as president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, my focus has always been on public education and the rights, responsibilities of a community in terms of the young people who come into or through our door. Education, in my opinion, is the cornerstone of our society, the one institution upon which the well-being of our world relies. It is a global responsibility. Focusing back here in the Commonwealth to date, we have stepped up as a legislature. We've stepped up our game in terms of funding public education, from early childhood education through higher education. I want you to take a look at this, and you're looking at it, this pie chart. And so that bright green dominant part of that pie chart is military spending. $1.14 trillion, 62% of our federal budget is devoted to military spending. This doesn't, and the military spending, the primary focus is on the war machine. We very much appreciate veteran spending, veterans benefits, supporting those individuals who have fought long and hard for us to be able to have this conversation. But the discretionary spending is very limited, and it has remained so for many, many years. And so we track down to 5% of the federal budget is spent on education. When I was president of the MTA back in the day, it was 7% of that federal budget. Far fewer dollars, but nonetheless, now it has dropped to 5% of that federal budget. The federal government has not kept up its responsibility to public education across the Commonwealth and across this nation, with a massive amount of money going toward military spending. So we're going to talk about how this budget affects the way in which we do business here in the Commonwealth on behalf of our constituents. Our panel, and I'm assuming they're here. Cole, you can take that pie chart down. Mike Conley, Representative Mike Conley, my colleague, is a state representative from Cambridge and Somerville. Here he is, Mike. And he's going to speak about the needing the needed housing policies. This is really his focus. I have seen him operate. I have seen him work on the floor of the chamber in these issues, including social housing and rent control as well. He's going to talk a little bit about that. Katie Murphy is a registered nurse and president of the Massachusetts Nurses Association. She's going to talk about the crisis in nursing and healthcare as providers try to rebuild the increasingly profit-driven system after COVID. And of course, our own Jonathan King, Professor Emeritus of Molecular Biology at MIT and board co-chair at Mass Peace Action. Thank you, Jonathan. He will address the impact on the important science and technology industries in Massachusetts. So let's start with Mike Conley, who will focus his 10 minutes on housing. And I'm going to keep you to the task, Michael, 10 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Carol. It's such an honor to be here. I hope everyone can hear me all right. I just started a timer on my phone, so I will do my best to comply. And it's an honor to serve alongside you. And good morning, Mass Peace Action and fellow allies. Good morning to my constituent, Henry Wardis. Thank you, everyone who's doing this organizing. And I want to preface this by reiterating my call for a ceasefire now, and want to uplift the work of our Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, who I think is doing us all so very proud in Washington, D.C. And I'm honored to follow Nina Turner, proud to have worked with her on the Bernie campaign and supported her in her own campaigns. And for anyone who doesn't know me, as Carol mentioned, I serve in the legislature. I'm a renter here in Cambridge. I was raised in public housing in Norwood. Like so many of my generation, I see no path to home ownership in the community that I represent. So it makes this struggle for housing justice real on a personal level. And because of, my personal understanding of this issue, as the representative mentioned, I've gravitated toward these issues in the legislature. I serve on the Joint Committee on Housing, and this year, and thank you, Rep. Doherty, for being a part of it, we started the Housing for All Legislative Caucus on Beacon Hill, and we've had numerous productive meetings with different leaders as we look to make progress on this issue this session. And so really, some of the big points I want to touch on in this conversation, and looking forward to questions. The Pentagon budget is starving state and local budgets, and we know this. And you saw the pie chart, and you saw that it is $1.14 trillion for the military budget. It is about $133 billion for housing and community development. There's obviously different metrics that you can use in any given year, but the fundamental outlook of that pie chart has been the same, where there's an enormous chunk that goes to the military budget, and then there's a sliver of investment that goes to housing. And really, that investment is really what it's all about. We often hear the call on Beacon Hill, we hear the call in our communities that says, we need to build housing. And I completely agree, we need to build housing. But too often, what people mean when they say we need to build housing is that we need to tinker with zoning, and then we will sit back and we will just hope that investors will come along and they will decide to build that housing for us. And certainly there can be a role for that. But in this moment where inequality is getting profoundly worse, and let's be clear about that, we like to think that the arc bends toward justice, but when it comes to wealth and income inequality, we're not bending toward any justice. We're headed in the wrong direction. The racial wealth gap has become 3 times worse over the course of my lifetime. And so I bring up inequality, I bring up the racial wealth gap to point out, and I'm sure Henry will agree with me here, that if we are simply relying on investors, if we're relying on speculators to build the housing that we need, we're never going to get it, because there are too many poor people and there's no money to be made building housing for them without public subsidy. And that's why our military posture, our ever-growing military budget, our entanglements all over the world. That's why that directly limits our ability to provide for the housing that we need. And, we're headed, certainly, I think, to even more struggles in this area. Another point I wanted to highlight for all of you is, it's not just the military budget. There's also inequities within the budget. And I want you to all to consider the mortgage interest tax deduction. And let's compare the mortgage interest tax deduction that's a benefit for homeowners with the Section 8 budget. And I can talk about Section 8. My mom, after I went off to college, she left the public housing that I was raised in, and then she got a Section 8 unit. So she lives in Section 8 out in Norwood. It's wonderful for her, but so many people could benefit from a Section 8 voucher or an expanded Section 8 program. They don't get that opportunity, again, because our military budget consumes so much of the discretionary spending. And so, you think about something like, I have some numbers I pulled up. Going back to the year 2015, the mortgage interest deduction cost the federal government $71 billion. But in that year, the Section 8 budget was $29.9 billion. So as you can see, wealthier people who can achieve home ownership, they get a tax benefit that costs a lot more than what the federal government is putting into Section 8 vouchers. And of course, the practical impacts for that are very clear all around us. We are in an unprecedented ongoing housing emergency. Our right to shelter law is teetering on the brink. I'm very proud to say that we in the House of Representatives have been standing up for this right to shelter law. You may have heard that there's a budget standoff ongoing on Beacon Hill. That standoff is because we in the House are insisting on overflow shelters, so no family that's entitled to shelter under the right to shelter has to go out on the street. So I see I'm at 6 minutes. So let me move on to social housing. I want to, really emphasize this possibility. And really, people wonder, well, what is social housing? Social housing is publicly financed mixed income housing. And it was actually the original idea for public housing here in the United States about 100 years ago. And the idea was the government can help finance housing, and it can be available to people with a wide range of incomes. And as we started just to go down that path, the banks and the real estate industry said, wait a minute, people are going to love this. And what they said was, let's just make the public housing only for poor people. And when we do that, we can stigmatize it and we can hit it with austerity. That's exactly what they did. And that's how we got to where we are today in the realm of federal public housing. There's really been a resurgence around this idea of social housing. Montgomery County, Maryland, almost by accident, walked into this idea when a conventional development deal fell apart. And at that point, the Local Housing Opportunities Commission, which is a housing finance agency and a housing authority, they approached the developer and they said, hey, that construction financing that fell apart for you, we, the government, are willing to provide you that financing if you give us an ownership stake in your development, and if you allow us to really dial up the affordability in that development. In that context, the developer said, great, you're saving us, let's do the deal. So they did this deal, it worked out perfectly, and they started replicating it. And so this is what social housing is. It's based on a housing production revolving loan fund. And I see I got 90 seconds left. So I'm going to tell you about the revolving loan fund, and then I'll call it there. And I want you to think about the two main ways we spend money on housing. It's usually these days low-income housing tax credits or housing vouchers. And both of them are good, but what you have to understand is each of those things, the money goes out the door. It does one thing, either it builds one unit of housing or it houses a family for 1 year, and the money never comes back. The power of social housing is the money goes out the door, it builds this mixed income housing, and then over time, as that development gains rents, the money comes back to the program to help fund other social housing projects. And so it becomes a revolving fund. And the longer we move forward with it, we make progress. So in the final 40 seconds, I'll tell you that I've been working closely with the Healey-Driscoll administration, proud to say that when they brought forward their housing bond bill, they've agreed to include a social housing demonstration program in their version of a $4 billion bond bill that we'll be considering next year. And so right now, I'm very focused on engaging with my legislative colleagues to ensure that we keep that social housing production program in the bond bill. And I think this will be an important piece for how we move forward. And I'm at 9 minutes and 59 seconds. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. You can count me in on supporting almost every effort, if not every effort that you make legislatively to improve our housing crisis here in the Commonwealth. It's very, very critical. And the work that you do is critical. And if I might say, the effort that you made to get a ballot question regarding rent control was a very brave effort. Keep moving forward. And you knew very well what was going to happen with that, but nonetheless.
You know what they say, change can't wait.
Right. So thank you so much for that. And folks will have an opportunity to ask Mike questions after Jonathan speaks. So Katie Murphy is up next. Katie, again, is a registered nurse and president of the MNA, the Massachusetts Nurses Association, one of my favorite unions. Katie, 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Representative Doherty, Representative Connolly, and boy, Nina Turner was like the most inspiring person I've seen. And you all set a high bar. I hope I can also make it under the limit. I'm hoping to talk about the work that we're doing in Massachusetts right now, so that when we're looking at that pie chart and looks at military spending, and we hear, well, of all the needs that we have, clearly the money is there. And I think that this is a strategy conference, and I hope we really come up with some real actions to address some of these issues, and so as a nurse and an advocate for social justice, I have to start by sharing a popular quote attributed to Gandhi, which states, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." So when we come together to discuss the current state, let's say, of maternal child health, which is what I'm going to focus on in Massachusetts and the nation, I have to conclude, based on recent studies and official reports, along with the experience of the Massachusetts Nurses Association members over the past 10 to 15 years, that especially when it comes to mothers and newborns, particularly those within the BIPOC and economically challenged communities, we are failing and failing badly to protect the vulnerable. And for that, we have to be ashamed. According to a white paper on maternal services in Massachusetts, published by the MNA's Congress on Nursing Practice, we have witnessed the closure of no less than 11 hospital-based maternity units in the last decade alone, including the highly controversial closures of the birthing center at Leominster Hospital just this October and the North Shore Birthing Center in Beverly a year earlier, which follows a trend by other healthcare corporations in the state to close vital, community-based organizations and services, programs and services as a means of funneling their patients to larger and more profitable major medical centers. We've also lost 2 additional maternity programs, with the loss of Norwood Hospital by flood and Brockton Hospital by fire. Hold on a second, folks. I'm just gonna, yep, there we go, fine. Yep. This is a map. Thank you very much for putting this up. You can look at where they've closed in Massachusetts. In each of the hospital industry generated closures, the critical factor, remember, that is in every single instance, the DPH, the Department of Public Health, conducted public hearings and their own investigations of those closures and deemed each and every one of them to be an essential service needed to preserve the health of the communities these programs served. Yet because of a weakness in our laws, the providers went ahead and closed those services. It's also important to note that those services that closed, be it Morton Hospital in Taunton, Holyoke Hospital in Holyoke, or Leominster Hospital Center, which serves two gateway community cities of Leominster and Fitchburg, all served communities with large and growing populations of BIPOC and economically challenged mothers and newborns. In the wake of all these closures, the MNA and other advocates in these communities have documented numerous cases of mothers going without needed pre- and postnatal care, and in too many cases, these vulnerable mothers were forced to deliver on the side of the highway, in the parking lots of shopping centers, or in overcrowded emergency departments. These are all communities where public transportation is lacking or non-existent, where many of these mothers lack access to a car or the resources to access care where they need it most. These are the very populations due to social determinants of health, such as poverty, food insecurity, and other factors that result in complex pregnancies and comorbidities, such as high blood pressure and diabetes, that often result in deliveries requiring acute care services in the very programs that have closed. Last year, a special legislative commission on racial inequalities in maternal health in Massachusetts issued a report showing how racial minorities are negatively impacted by inequitable policies and practices, including lack of access to appropriate maternal care. And this year, a week before the DPH hearing on the closure of the birthing center at Leominster Hospital, the same agency issued a scathing report showing a dramatic increase in the rate of serious complications and maternal child deaths from labor and delivery in our state over the last 10 years. DPH researchers found that women of color continue to face higher rates of complications, with Black women consistently experiencing the highest rates. Compared to white non-Hispanic women, Black non-Hispanic women experience 2.3 times higher rates of complications on average during the study period, and Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander women experienced rates 1.2 times higher. This is the very population placed most at risk by the proposed closure of the maternity services that we documented in our white paper. A quote by Governor Maura Healey in the press release about the DPH report clearly articulates the same concerns about the need for access to services like the birthing center, where she stated, quote, "This report shows that there is much more work that we need to do to address racial and gender inequities in healthcare. It is essential that everyone has access to comprehensive, high quality, and inclusive maternal health care. We can and must do better for mothers, for kids, and for families, and our administration is committed to doing just that," end quote. But after making that statement, she failed to intervene, and the state failed to intervene also to stop the closure of the Leominster Birthing Center, instead calling for yet another report on the issue. And on the very day last month, when the DPH commissioner was meeting with MNA members to discuss our concerns about this and other closures, the local paper in Fitchburg reported on a mother delivering her baby on the side of the road by local EMTs. So why are we in this crisis? The answer is twofold. First, we've turned our healthcare system over to the private sector, either in the form of massive nonprofit conglomerates like Mass General Brigham, Bay State, or B.I. Leahy, or to massive for-profit providers and hedge funds like Stewart and Tenet Healthcare. In all cases, they function the same, with a focus on the bottom line at all costs, with little regard to the local needs of the communities they serve. Second, the same system functions under a political structure that has abandoned the responsibility to regulate their behavior and their decisions, particularly when it comes to protecting and preserving essential services, including maternity care, pediatric care, and behavioral health care. Those services that are expensive to deliver and often offer lower reimbursement rates and thus lower profit margins. As a result, it's no exaggeration to say that in our state, there is no system to actually protect the public health of our communities, no laws to ensure that the services deemed essential to those communities are provided, and if provided, are maintained. Fighting the situation requires a massive mobilization of impacted communities, focusing on organizing progressive forces that are guided by the communities themselves and led by those members and advocates from the communities of color and the disenfranchised most impacted by these callous decisions. In the case of maternal child health, there's a positive promise in this fight. On the South Shore, we have watched a coalition of advocates, legislators, and community-based providers mobilize to explore processes and regulatory initiatives to reestablish access to maternity services for impacted communities. In Beverly, and more recently in North Central Worcester County, we have watched strong community coalitions form to fight these closures. In the Leominster campaign, the entire Northern Worcester County legislative delegation joined forces with the Community United to Save Our Birthing Center coalition of more than 4,000 residents, advocates, including the MNA, to wage a 4-month effort to educate the public and the power structure of the need to preserve this service.
Katie,
More
you have
than
about 50 seconds.
What? Another? Okay, then I'm gonna. You know what? I'll finish up, and I'm gonna look forward to a brisk conversation on this going forward. Let's see. I just want to say that we did lose that fight in Leominster, but we live to fight another day, and we believe that communities and coalitions learned a lot from these campaigns, and we look forward to working on that going forward. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Katie. I didn't mean to cut you off. You do have about 50 more seconds.
Oh no, I'm sure we will. I'm sure the conversation will consider. Thank you very much, Rep. Doherty.
In the Q&A, I have a question of my own, and that is the reasons why these hospitals are closing. And I focus on my own community of Morton Hospital closing as well, and knowing fully what the reason is. Thank you, and I look forward to that Q&A. So our next speaker is our own Jonathan King, Professor Emeritus of Molecular Biology at MIT. And there you are. Hi, Jonathan. How are you this morning?
Good, good.
You're
Cole, give me a co-host so I can share the screen.
Okay. We won't count you in until you start talking.
Oh, am I already the co-host?
Yeah, you're already.
All right. Oh no. Why is it always?
That's the way the technology doesn't always work.
All right. Okay, so first place, thanks to everybody. Thanks
Don't see anything shared yet.
This conference. Which
Jonathan, we don't see anything shared.
Oh. How about now?
No, sir.
It's filling my screen.
You need to share screen using the Zoom green button on the bottom of Zoom.
Share screen.
And then you got to choose your window, which window you want to share.
The desktop. Or I don't believe it.
Nope.
Nope. All right, forget it. I'll just talk. So it's too bad. It's a good slide set. So it hasn't been easy to understand how in one of the richest, most scientifically advanced nations, the country was totally unprepared for the coronavirus pandemic. Part of the answer we've heard about from Katie, the absence of a coherent national health system. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars on Medicare, Medicaid, private health insurance, and other support for the hospital system. But sadly, this entire system is focused only on people once they are already ill. And it's divorced from the effort to investigate the agents that cause the disease. Now, in the total federal budget, Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security are the biggest components. but they are trust funds, right? You pay into them and you hope you'll get back from them. Congress can't easily shift those around. The key, and none of them have anything to do with the prevention of disease. They all kick in once you're already sick. The prevention of disease requires the activities of agencies like the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, Centers for Disease Control, Department of Energy. They are funded each year in the discretionary budget that Carol showed. Those components are actually so small a fraction of the total federal budget that they weren't even labeled in Carol's pie chart. So the National Institutes of Health, which is a funding agency required for research on all the ills that afflict us, cancer, heart disease, arthritis, diabetes, coronavirus, etc., at the time of the onset of the pandemic was in the order of $40 billion, $50 billion, less than 5% of the total federal budget. The NSF of the order of 1 or 2%. Now, it is true that during the pandemic, the federal government kicked in and they increased transiently the National Institutes of Health and National Science Foundation, CDC budgets, and put in money to promote the development of vaccines. It's important to understand that the vaccines, which were, a marvel of modern science, their development depended on decades of prior in federal public investment in things like the structure of viruses. And it's not just biochemical, structure of viruses depend on X-ray diffraction, electron microscopy, physics, chemistry, etc. So Moderna didn't have to determine the structure of the spike protein of coronavirus. It was freely available in the Protein Data Bank, which is a federally funded resource available to anybody in the world who has internet access. And they didn't have to determine the sequence of nucleotides in the coronavirus genome. It was already deposited in GenBank and freely available. Now, these funds, it's not generally appreciated. So here in Massachusetts, we get about $3 billion a year in these federal research funds. It doesn't come through the legislature. It comes directly to investigators at UMass Amherst, at Worcester Polytech, at Holy Cross, at Boston College, Boston University, MIT, Tufts, and Brandeis, and all the medical schools. And it pays the salary of thousands of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows throughout the Commonwealth. And they are the workforce that's trying to find out why it is that we get heart disease and diabetes and arthritis and coronavirus. It's kind of invisible, and it keeps the colleges and universities alive, because the overhead on these grants pays the tuition, pays the plumbers and the electricians and the carpenters and the staff that keep these places going. And of course, the budgets flow out into many small industries around Massachusetts that feed biomedical research and are the reason that we're a world center of biomedical research. Well, unfortunately, if you look back historically, the first signs of the coronavirus were in Southeast SARS and MERS, and that was more than 10 years ago. And what should have happened is a very big increase in research and development on preparing for those pandemics. It didn't happen because the growth of the Pentagon budget required the restriction of every single sector of the civilian budget: housing, healthcare, NIH, biomedical research, Meals on Wheels, etc. Sometimes economists, in order to get hired as economists, you have to be willing to say this publicly: oh, there's no relationship between the military spending and civilian spending. It's two buckets. No, it's one bucket. One of the things about Trump is he did admit that one time when he was cutting the civilian programs 50% across the board. The National Governors Program asked him, why are you cutting these popular programs? And he said, well, because we need to free up enough money to give a 15% increase to the Pentagon. So that $3 billion that's coming into Massachusetts, it should be $6 billion or $9 billion to actually deal with the needs of the Commonwealth. Katie talked about the maternal health child care crisis. Because we don't have a national health system, these statistics are kept in each state differently, different rules. It's very hard to see nationally. So about 1/3 of the third highest cause of the mortality is infectious disease. Well, you need to know what infectious diseases are afflicting these newborns and these mothers. That requires epidemiological studies that would normally be funded by the NIH or Centers for Disease Control, but are not being funded. So we know that children are dying in the richest country in the nation. We have the highest maternity and child mortality in the world. And yet we really don't know very much about exactly what the causes are. Yes, some of it is, Katie described, as the cutting down of the medical services because they're so expensive, but that's not the only reason, right? You really need to find out what's really behind at least some of the cases. I'll end with in the midst of this crisis, the federal government is following the insane policy, probably the biggest boondoggle in human history, of spending more than $1 trillion of our income tax dollars, because that's what the discretionary budget is, our income tax dollars, to upgrade all the components of the nuclear weapons triad, submarines, airplanes, and the fixed intercontinental ballistic missiles in Arkansas and Colorado and a few other states. Absolutely insane. We have thousands of nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert. One of my slides shows one submarine. One of these, we have 14 of these Ohio-class submarines. One of these submarines can fire 24 missiles. Each of the 24 missiles has 8 independently targeted warhead. One submarine firing the missiles can wipe out all the major cities of any nation on Earth: China, Russia, India, etc. And yet the government's proposing to buy 8 more. Enormously profitable, right? It's a business, a rotten, dangerous business with guaranteed profits. You can't look into it because of national security, and our tax dollars that are recycled.
1 minute, Jonathan.
Our tax dollars are recycled back to supporting the members of Congress who then vote for the money. Members of the Armed Services Committee have more campaign contributions than any other sector of the Congress, and it comes from the military-industrial complex. Unfortunately, despite the fact that all your life you've heard about income taxes and the IRS and the need to pay your taxes, no agency of the government has ever reported back to the American people how their dollars are actually spent. Very few Americans know that more than half the income tax dollars they send to the government is spent on the war machine, not paying salaries of soldiers, service airmen, but buying weapons at very high cost. Representative Doherty actually has a bill in the state legislature, Taxpayers' Right to Know, which would, since the federal government isn't going to tell us how our money is used, that would have at least the state report to taxpayers how the money is spent. As Nina Turner described, the situation in the U.S. Congress is not very good. There aren't too many opportunities. Democrats and Republicans both line up behind these outrageous expenditures, and so we have a long way to go to resist them. Thanks.
Thank you. very much, Jonathan. Every time I hear you talk about that comparative information regarding the Pentagon budget and discretionary spending, it's chilling. We hope we can get the bill over the line this year in the legislative session, but who knows? At any rate, we have about 15 minutes, a little bit more for Q&A. And so I would ask participants to use the raise hand function. I'll try to keep track of you and direct your question, if you will, to a specific person. All right, John? John, you're on.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, I was struck during the pandemic that it was reported that a lot of the research that had been done was actually funded by money out of the Defense Department, out of the defense part of the pie chart through DARPA. And I wondered if Jonathan or Katie or somebody could fill us in on how much of that defense pie chart is actually being spent on things we would probably support, the research at the universities and so forth. And if we could move that over to the domestic side so that it covers what the people really need rather than some defense,
Yeah, so that's a propaganda myth of the Defense Department that they're funding biomedical research. Not true. It's against the law. They can't use their funds only if it's explicitly protecting the military in the field, maybe delivering vaccines to the battleground. But in general, DARPA is not a significant player in the development of things like vaccines. That's all on the civilian. 95% of it is on the civilian side.
Thank you.
You can't switch it over because that's been appropriated for the Department of Defense. So you can't say, "Oh, we're going to use that for vaccine development." No.
Thank you, John. Questions? Use the raise hand function.
Didn't you have one about Taunton Hospital, Carol?
Yeah, so I do. I want to talk with Katie or ask Katie what is your thinking about the reason why these hospital closures are occurring so rapidly over the recent past? And I think particularly of Morton Hospital, which first closed its pediatric and then its maternity and then its detox center, and it kind of goes on like that. What's your perspective on those closures, particularly the maternity?
I want to thank you so much also, Representative Doherty, for all your work in fighting these closures. You know what it really seems, I mean, and I feel like most recently with Leominster, it was very clearly, let's put that money in the academic medical center. You know what, I almost feel like, and we've seen these closures right over a decade. It almost feels like almost the gloves are off, and that, these big, for-profit, and they are systems, even if they're not for profit, are saying, where can we get, let's close those programs that are not giving us as much return, and get more lucrative programs in our community. I mean, the detox program that was closed at Morton, I mean, it wasn't closed, right? It was moved to Kearney. Again, if people in the Taunton area, are requiring these services, it's now in Dorchester. It's moving it out of the community, and I really feel that what's interesting that with the Leominster closure, rather than a system looking, gee, what's needed in my community? Is it maternity? Is it behavioral health? Is it pediatric? And then providing that service, it's upside down. And they're saying, we can get a bigger bang for our buck, a greater return to our shareholders if we, put this in a big major medical center in a big city. And that benefits us, and the community is not even taken into account. So I feel, and I feel that we're going to see more of that as hospital systems say, gee, there's nobody to stop us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katie. So we have a couple of hands raised. Frank first, and then Henry, and then Mary Ellen.
Yeah, this is a question for Mike Connolly. Mike, I assume that you agree that rent control should be one of the elements in any program to bring down housing costs. What is it going to take to reintroduce rent control and allow municipalities to institute it for their residents?
Well, sure, certainly great question. I mean, I think briefly, Representative Nika Elagardo and I, about 5 years ago, worked with housing advocates to really bring the Tenant Protection Act to the legislature. And I think we've seen a lot of progress over the past several years, but there's still some resistance, I think, among legislative leaders to the topic. And so I think we really need to bring people together and focus on what people are telling us. Our ballot initiative effort commissioned a poll where we saw that 65% of Massachusetts voters want us to lift the ban on rent control. That support is very durable, even when those voters hear all of that real estate industry propaganda. They nevertheless are unswayed. And that support extends not just to renters, it's 80% of renters who support it, it's 60% of homeowners, and it's also strong majority support in every county in Massachusetts. It's really encouraging, I think, that, the city of Boston did a home rule petition. The town of Brookline has passed a home rule petition through their town meeting. I think that's very significant. And the city of Somerville has a home rule petition that's pending. The legislation that I've reintroduced this session with Jamie Eldridge, the Tenant Protection Act, is the only bill that would actually accommodate what each municipality is telling us they want to do. And so my hope is that as we move forward, even though there's resistance, what's giving me hope is the reality on the ground. And when I have conversations with leaders on Beacon Hill, what I tell them is no one's coming to save us, and we have to take action as soon as possible. And the final thing I'll say is rent control is simply an intervention. It's frankly, in my opinion, it's a moderate policy that has been around for over 100 years. Every time that we are in a moment of housing emergency, we've seen rent control from the 1920s to World War II, from 1970 until the mid-90s. The truly radical thing is that we are in this unprecedented housing emergency, and there's absolutely no limit to what a landlord could do or what a speculator could do in terms of wholesale displacement. So more work to be done.
Thank you. So we have about 11 or 12 minutes remaining in this segment. And 5 hands raised. So we want to make sure that we get as many of these folks who have questions. So it's Henry up next, then Mary Ellen, Martha, Russell, and Cleopatra.
Quick question for Mike. So if people in Greenfield or Cambridge or Somerville are really interested in social housing, what's the priority? What should they focus on right now? Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. I'm going to put the bill in the text. And so I would say the most simple thing you could do if you're hearing this conversation, if you like what you're hearing about social housing, drop an email right now to your representative and your senator and let them know that you'd like them to co-sponsor this bill. Excuse me. Sorry. I had the House session on my microphone and it just came in. And so I would ask, I would suggest to your legislators co-sponsor our bill, and you can mention to them that the Healey-Driscoll administration has affirmatively come out and said that they want to see this happen, and I'm really grateful for that. And they can always reach out to me as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Mary Ellen?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for this session. And my question, I think, is posed to both Mike and Carol. You know, we have some wonderful bills in the state legislature, and many of them have been around for a while. Certainly, the mass care has been on for something like it has been on decades. And certainly, what was it, the 5 for 15? And, it takes so many years to push things through. And we do get victories, but it seems to me that there are clearly powerful interests behind the scenes, as well as the prohibitive institutional problems that prevent us from moving forward more effectively. And I'm just wondering, is there a way to be more strategic, to take those powerful interests into account, or to try to get around these barriers that really prevent us from getting our legislation passed?
Mike, you want to take that?
I think, I know later in the program, we're going to hear from Harris Grumman. I think we're going to hear from people with the Work and Family Mobility Act. I think strategically, one of the things I've really come to appreciate is how it's helpful, I think, to sometimes present our proposals in moderate terms. Using rent control as an example, there's a lot of there's significant info out there that says, if you were to say to a voter, I want to do this thing and it's called rent control, you'll get a certain level of support. And then if you say to the voter, I want to do this thing and it's the same thing, but I call it rent stabilization, it actually gets significantly more support. When you think of the Work and Family Mobility Act, which I have to tell you, I am so proud that we finally took that action to provide driver's licenses to all in our Commonwealth. This is a life-saving step forward, something for my entire adult life people had wanted to see, and we finally did it. Frankly, there was a strategic decision made to bring in law enforcement and put them front and center in much of the campaigning. Now, as progressives, we've gone through a lot of talk around, reforming police, having unarmed alternatives, etc. It probably isn't our first idea that we would turn to law enforcement to try to move that forward. But the reality was, that was the strategy and it worked. And so I think, to answer your question, we have to be willing to work with anyone if it will mean we can move forward with our priorities, and we have to be willing to stand up to anyone whenever our priorities are at stake. And I'll just offer that as some quick thoughts, and we could talk about this for a long time.
And just really quickly, from perspective here, as legislators become more and more inundated with people who are falling out of their houses, it is a community problem. And so I've proposed to our mayor that we bring community organizations together who are working with families, all of us talking with one another, and include landlords in that discussion, because they are the barrier to moving poorer people, affordable housing, and other kinds of things forward. In their interest. I appreciate it very much, but how do we figure? We got a problem, we need to solve it. Thank you. So thank you, Michael. Martha?
Hi, my question is for Katie Murphy. And I'm just wondering how legislation and the campaign for Medicare for All intersects with the efforts to get back these 11 closed maternal child health units. It just seems like there's a lot of commonality there.
Thank you so much. Somebody mentioned the Medicare for All has been introduced in the legislature, I think at least for 20 years. And I think when we look at the many needs of the communities, and I just was focused on maternal child health, but there have been so many closures of actual whole hospitals. So, we can tinker around the edges, but this is really, I don't call it a healthcare system. I call it a healthcare chaos, because, we're all so poorly served. So, we have a bill in the legislature right now, preserving essential services. So that we're trying to change the process, give the Department of Public Health more teeth, put in some carrots, put in some sticks, so that we can hold off any more closures. But we're also supporters of improved Medicare for all, the mass care bill, because that just takes the money and this profit motive out of healthcare, which, as nations around the world have figured this out. We even have an economist, Dr. Shao, I think is he at MIT, who helped Taiwan develop their single payer system. He's here in Massachusetts, and that we have so many great minds who would work on this. And if we had that money that's floating around the system and in the Caymans and providing really exorbitant executive compensation, if we had that, we could have these systems open. We could have these birth centers. I learned when we were in the Beverly birth center fight, here's wonderful progressive Massachusetts. With the closure of the Beverly birth center, we now have one freestanding birth center in Massachusetts. Texas has 92. So maybe we have work to do. Anyway, to answer your question, they're both, knitted together. We see them both as solving the same problem, and so worth the fight to see this happen in Massachusetts. And I think it can happen.
Thank you, Katie. Probably one more question, Cole, wherever you are. We're winding up this session. So Russell is up next.
Yeah, just very quickly, I was going to ask also about single payer. So Katie's pretty much answered my question. I was just going to point out that healthcare is now a commodity in this country. Mm-hmm. And I think that looking at it on that basis and, looking for allies to deal with the financial issues, the Mass Cares developed a healthcare calculator, which helps us find out how much money can be saved with single payer. But Katie, you pretty much, talked about what I wanted to hear. So I'll lower my hand. Thanks.
Thank you. Cleopatra?
Yeah, I would want to speak on the housing with the rent control. I wanted to know, with having that in place, would that redline a lot of people?
I don't think so. Although, I do think you raise a good point, or I think I'm hearing a point that I think could be on the table here, which is that, rent control is not a comprehensive solution. It is a strategy. I think of it actually as like sprinklers in a building. Okay. So 100 years ago, I think this is true. I imagine there was a time when there were no sprinkler requirements in buildings. And then people came along and said, we need sprinklers. And of course, I would expect, the response would be, oh my God, we can't afford this. We'll never be able to build buildings if you make us do sprinklers. And at some point, people said, no, this is just how it is. You need to do this. It's the same with rent control. We have to have basic tenant protections. At the same time, you wouldn't just have sprinklers as your only line of fire defense. You would also have, fire alarms, a fire department, education, etc. And so I think if you simply look at the concept of rent control in its own right, there are many benefits. There are areas where, it won't necessarily address every issue, but it is a necessary element of a much larger package. Does that help answer it, or am I missing what you were thinking?
It helps answer some, and then it brightens my mind to think of other avenues, potential or positive avenues, things along the line.
Right, because, I think maybe what you might be getting at is, some people will say, well, hey, if we had rent control, then the people who have it will be great. They'll be stable. And what about everybody else? And, I think The answer to that is that it is a necessary, just policy for reform, and at the same time, other comprehensive pieces will be needed so that everyone has housing. And the final thing I'll say is housing has to be a human right. Imagine, Massachusetts, we invented the concept of public education. Imagine if we never said all children go to school. What would we be doing? Would we be fighting over the budget, saying we want 100,000 more kids to get to go to school next year than last year? No, that would be crazy. We made the decision hundreds of years ago, education is for everyone. We have to make that same decision as a society today, that housing is for everyone. And it's why we're here, because I think it's fair to say the number one reason why housing isn't for everyone is that military budget. It's a huge reason why. And so we need, it's why we have to be engaged in the peace movement, because it's not just the morally just thing to do, it's also the practical thing that can help us provide everyone with the dignity that they need. And of course, that's essential to actually sustaining our democracy in 2024 and in years ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Cole, do we have a quick from Ron? Do you have time?
No, we have to move on.
Sorry, Ron. Okay, Cole says, and he's the man. We're moving on. Thank you very much to the
Actually, that
panel.
was Henry's
Very
wife.
interesting conversation, and I look forward to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, Jonathan, Mike, and Kate. And let's move on. Martha, you're on.
Hi, it's my pleasure to introduce Diana DeZoglio. Is she here?
She is.
I am here. Hello.
Hi, Diana, welcome. It's my pleasure to introduce you, though I think you need little introduction. You are our courageous and talented state auditor. You first served in state government as state representative, and then as state senator from the 1st Essex before running for your current position. You saw firsthand the backroom deals and secret arrangements which sabotage the carrying out of the people's work. We look forward to hearing from you about your ballot initiative to audit the state legislature.
Thank you so much for the very gracious introduction. I do appreciate that. Great to see some of my colleagues on today. I didn't get to see everybody. I'm zooming in from my phone. I'm having some laptop technology issues, so I can't really see everybody right now. But I just did get to listen a little bit to Representative Connolly and hear about some of his tremendous work. It's been great to partner with him. And then I, of course, saw Representative Doherty just a second ago. So great to see some representation from the legislature on this call, actually, in talking about our shared values. My name is Diana DeZoglio. I am your new state auditor. What a humble opportunity to get to join you, who are the grassroots organizers, the ones making the difference at the ground level. First and foremost, thank you for all that you do. We can't do anything that we do without support like yours. In the grassroots, out in our communities, in our neighborhoods. So thank you for that. You may have heard that we're auditing the state legislature right now, and it is something that we talked about on the campaign trail. I campaigned for state auditor for I believe almost 2 years. And on the campaign trail, we repeatedly talked about the need to increase transparency, accountability, equity, and accessibility in our state government across the board. But in our state legislature, especially where, as you just said, we know that there are closed door conversations happening about the budget. Policy decisions are being made behind those closed doors. The very people that the legislature is intended to serve are shut out from what's happening up on Beacon Hill. We are frequently ranked as the least transparent and accessible state government in the entire nation. Our legislature is not subject to public records laws, not subject to open meeting laws like our municipalities are. We have seen, some of the fallout of that, especially recently, where we've had these challenges with getting those decisions made by the end of the deadline, that end of year deadline before legislators went on break. We've seen challenges with some of these tax packages being done behind closed doors with little participation from the folks who are being impacted the most by them most recently. And this has been being called one of the least productive sessions in many, many years. And that is incredibly unfortunate, especially, to see this happening, especially as someone who herself came from, before serving in this capacity, the legislature. I served as a legislative aide. I served as a state representative for 6 years, representing a chunk of the Merrimack Valley. I then served as a senator for 4 years. And, that 10 plus years of being in the legislative side of things really did open up my eyes to, some of the great things that our state legislature really can do to help families in our communities, vulnerable families, especially who need assistance the most. But it also demonstrated to me, the incredible work that needs to be done to make government work better. And that is what my office does in the Office of State Auditor. It's actually our slogan. State Auditor's Office makes government work better. And we reach out to folks like you to help us do just that. But in our pursuit of a legislative audit, and we audit every state entity, by the way, 200 plus state entities, in our pursuit of conducting a legislative audit, we have been stonewalled. And we've actually presented to the Attorney General and to legislative leaders the fact that 117 audits have been discovered, demonstrating clear precedent that these audits have been done in the past. Actually, audits of the legislature occurred nearly every year since the inception, since the creation of the auditor's office back in 1849, signaling that the legislative intent of the office and the creation of the office was always meant to include auditing the legislature alongside of all of these different state entities that we have been known to audit. It's only been in recent years that the legislature just sort of stopped getting audited. A speaker, it said, hey, we don't think that you have the authority to do this. The auditor at the time said, oh, we must not have the authority. And then it just stopped happening after that. So those years, though, are very few in comparison with the many, many years. I believe it's about 150 years precedent, more or less, where audits did occur. So we want to bring back the audits that always did occur in the office before recent years, and to make sure that we are holding the legislature accountable to you, the residents of the Commonwealth, and making sure that you have access to what's happening behind those closed doors, so that you can make informed decisions about what you want to support, what you don't want to support, what you think about particular issues. The legislative process needs a lot of work. We need access to the financials more than we have access to them right now. And cooperation would be greatly appreciated. But since they are not cooperating, and since the Attorney General, when we've recently contacted her, decided to support legislative leaders' position that they don't have to comply with this audit, we are left really with this ballot question, which will give you, the voters, the opportunity to make crystal clear to the legislature that you expect full compliance with the law, just like everybody else has to comply, and that you expect transparency, accountability, and accessibility to what's happening up on Beacon Hill, that it's your tax dollars, that it's the people's house, not the politician's house. You will have an opportunity to make that crystal clear, thanks to many of your efforts. I don't know if Nancy's on this call, but I need to give her a shout out, Nancy Steinberg. It was amazing in helping to get our Revolution and other activist groups support, amongst many others, too many to list probably on this call. But I just want to take a moment just to thank all of the activists that are on this call. I don't know if Active Mass is here as well, but a lot of the groups here and a lot of the individuals here really helped in ensuring that the signatures were able to be collected. We have about 98,000 certified signatures at this point. We are incredibly excited about that. That is a tremendous showing. So we are headed towards getting on the ballot. We got over the 75,000 needed to get on the ballot. And we're likely to, once the legislature has an opportunity to weigh in on this, we are likely to need to gather another 12,000+ signatures in the springtime. I will ask you all for your support now for that time period. We know the legislature has been pushing back. Not everyone in the legislature, obviously, the legislative leaders have been pushing back tremendously. And because of that, we're assuming that in the spring, it's very likely that we'll need to go out and get the 12,000+ signatures again to make sure that we can get on the ballot in November of 2024. But this is a tremendous opportunity, folks. It has seen unbelievable pushback up on Beacon Hill. I shouldn't really say unbelievable. It's unfortunately not that surprising. But we do have a tremendous opportunity to make progress, to make bold and meaningful change, to make sure that we have a seat at the table where those decisions are made. And I'm thankful so much for your support. I humbly and respectfully ask for your support moving forward as we press on, as we press ahead. We can't do this without you. So thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to you for any questions. Thanks again.
Thank you, Diana. I think we have 10 minutes for questions. You can either put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. I think John Weissman has a question. Do you want to go ahead and say your question? John, are you there?
Okay. The question is, does the auditor have authority to audit so-called nonprofits who spend on executive salaries, union busting, and otherwise deviating from their nonprofit charter granted by the Commonwealth?
Yeah, thank you so much for your support of labor and for the great question. We do have authority to audit various aspects of nonprofits if they receive state funding. We are able to sometimes go in and to look at the state funded aspect of their operations. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to look beyond the state dollars that they receive, but we can look into the state funded aspect of the organization. And then what we generally do is we will work with the Inspector General's office and refer issues over to the IG's office if things fall out of our purview, so much so that it would render the audit, sort of irrelevant if we really do need to get access to how all of that money is getting intertwined or access to additional processes and procedures. Because if a state entity has some sort of challenges, we're able to go in according to our mandate and look at all the processes, all the procedures that go along with the spending of those dollars. Sometimes it can be challenging to get into a nonprofit where they may receive a lot in private funding or municipal funding or federal funding or wherever they're getting their revenue from, that disallows us, so to speak, to go beyond that state funded aspect to get to the root cause of some of the problems or to really take a look at the processes and procedures the way we would like to. The Inspector General has a different authority than we do in some of those regards, where they can look at, and I'll just add this in, you didn't ask this question, but some may be wondering about municipalities as well, where the Inspector General has authority to look at those sort of the private aspects, as the AG does as well. And also the IG has the authority to look at municipalities, for example, where we have, wanted to maybe come in and take a look. We thought we were going to get invited in, but if the municipalities don't invite us to take a look at their finances, according to state law, we're not actually able to go in and look at their finances. They have to request our coming in and auditing them. But the Inspector General doesn't need that request when it comes to those municipalities. And the Attorney General doesn't need that request when it comes to private dollars being spent. And they both can obviously also look at malfeasance and if there are, causes for concern in that regard. So we can look at certain aspects, but a lot of times we will refer it to the IG or to the AG's office because it's unfortunately limited sometimes. And, while that's unfortunate, we do appreciate the partnership with the AG and IG's office in that regard. But state entities are fully under the purview of the Office of State Auditor to look fully at processes, procedures, budget, spending, all of those things, procurement, the list goes on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Henry has a question in the chat, and then following Henry, Sam Lambert.
So quickly, if the ballot initiative passes, does the Attorney General or the Supreme Court have the ability to prevent a performance audit by your office?
So that's also a great question. Unfortunately, our Attorney General has decided to preview and seemingly instigate, seemingly I say, because I would like to get more clarity from the AG on this, but a constitutional challenge of sorts in the future for kind of sort of foreshadowing a constitutional challenge to the law that we're passing. I find that to be incredibly disappointing. We did run the language by the Attorney General's office. They looked at the constitutionality, they cleared it to go to the ballot, knowing that if it went to the ballot, there was the opportunity that we were going to get on the ballot. 75,000 plus people signing is a pretty serious thing. We also have so many activists and so many people who are out there collecting and volunteering, 600 plus folks, so that were part of our volunteer group. So a lot of work. I'm saying that just to say a lot of work went into this. Right now, the AG's office did clear it to go to the ballot, saying that it did not pose, in order to get on the ballot, constitutional challenges. But fast forward, the Attorney General later did sort of preview some potential constitutional issues. I know in other states, Attorney Generals generally abide by what is known as a duty to defend the law against constitutional challenges, and that's at the federal level as well. So I'm not sure here in Massachusetts what is happening with that, sort of seeming preview and foreshadowing of, well, there'll likely be a constitutional challenge. I would ask that the Attorney General does support the law once it is passed into law by the voters, should this pass, which I fully believe that it will, that if it does pass and when it does pass, that would be supported, that the law would be supported against a constitutional challenge after the AG did clear it to go to the ballot, rather than what it's seeming that, the AG would potentially, isn't sure about that. So I would say, I think on this group, or in this call, I would ask folks to please let your voices be heard on that issue, because certainly after doing all of this work, having been cleared to go to the ballot, getting it on the ballot, when we pass it into law, I am fully going to be requesting that our Attorney General support the law against that constitutional challenge, rather than support what's likely to be legislative leaders if there is a constitutional challenge, rather than supporting their potential desire to overturn this or block this from happening. But we are pushing forward full steam ahead. No progress is made unless we fight for the progress that we're making on issues like this. I love the name of the group, right? It's our revolution. And, think about those words. It's revolutionary sometimes, when you have to consider the changes that are needed to have those types of revolutions, it's challenging at times. So we do expect pushback, is the short answer on that. But we're pushing forward regardless, and we're going to keep going. And if there is pushback, then we're going to keep going then, and we're going to jump over every hurdle and every roadblock that they put in our way. I'm here for the long haul. I'm not going anywhere. I have a 4-year term. So I'll be here before the ballot initiative, after the ballot initiative, and I'll be there to fight every step of the way alongside of you to make sure that this law is upheld.
Sam Lambert.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And I followed your work on NDAs. And I know they are impacting municipalities as well. You mentioned municipalities. Is that something that has to be requested through the executive office or the legislative office of a municipality?
Great question. The local officials have to vote on it. So if it's a council, if it's a select board, they have to vote on that, and that needs to be sent over to us. And generally speaking, we try to do our best if a select board or a city council sends us something that they'd like us to audit. There is due to law a price, a cost on that. Generally speaking, I believe it's a lot less than having an independent auditing firm come in, or I should say a privately funded auditing firm come in. But we are usually willing to work alongside of municipalities if they request our assistance. But it is rare that they do request our assistance, I will say. So, where we're here, generally speaking, if folks do put in that request, on the rare occasion that occurs.
So, Diana, I want to thank you again for your leadership on this issue. It's so important, and we're so excited to have you leading this effort. And I want you to know that we're going to invite you back, but next time your only responsibility will be to lead us in song. And
that's a little bit easier. I've been doing that since I was a kid. The auditing only started recently, so. Well, I appreciate it so much, Henry, and thank you so much for your advocacy and your leadership in assisting with the ballot question as well. I mean, you were really tremendous, and your whole team. And we have some work to do, but I'm so grateful that you're in this for the long haul alongside of us. And please, invite me back anytime. It's great to be here. Have a great rest of the day in your meetings. And I see Erin's on the call too. Erin, thanks for being one of our top 10 signatories on the ballot question, leading the charge with Act on Mass. And we'll see you all soon. Call anytime. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. So anyone who wants to follow up may follow up. Thanks.
And we'll see you at the victory line, Diane. Okay.
Exactly. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Right. Okay, so next up, we want to do the first of our breakout sessions, and to lead us through that, Cole, can you explain the process?
Okay, we've had a lot of trouble with our sign-up forms, so the breakouts are partially populated, but some of you are going to have to find your way into your own breakout. I'm tearing my hair out with spreadsheets and other problems, but software. But anyway, we have 8 breakouts. One of the breakouts that was scheduled for this morning, the Global Cooperation to Address Climate Change, has been canceled. The convener, Ben Levinson, is seriously ill, apparently, and cannot do it. So apologies for that, and you'll have to find your way into another breakout. So when I open the breakout rooms, if you're on a computer, you'll see something at the bottom that says Join Breakout. You also can pick a different breakout. When you're in a breakout, you can go back to the main room and change your mind and go into another one. We have an hour set aside for the breakouts. Importantly, if you are a presenter in a breakout and you intend to show slides, you must become a co-host of the Zoom meeting before the breakouts are opened. And if you somehow get into a breakout and you need to be a co-host and you haven't gotten it yet, you've got to come back to the main room. We can then make you a co-host and you can go back in. The same goes if you're intending to make a video recording of your breakout. You have to be a co-host before the breakout's open. So I'm going to pause a minute to see if there's any last-minute people who are not co-hosts yet and need to be. To find out if you're a co-host, on your Zoom menu at the bottom, it says participants. And open your participants, find your name, and see if you're a co-host or not. They're in alphabetical order with the co-host first and then everybody else. So I'm going to pause. The reproductive rights people, none of them were here 15 minutes ago, but they want 5 co-hosts. So I hope some of them have joined. I'll go check that now. Sorry for the delay.
Can I ask how we determine at the participant list whether or not we're a co-host? I don't.
If you are a co-host, it will say that right next to your name.
Okay.
No, sorry, it doesn't seem to list ourselves. When we see a list, we're not included because we can't send a chat to ourselves.
No, you don't use the chat. You use the participants.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is Anthony Flacavento. I need to be made a co-host. I don't see that indicated, please.
Okay, Anthony. Okay,
Nicole,
got
that's only
Anthony.
if you have slides to present, correct?
Who?
Yes.
Yeah.
Doug Selwyn needs to be co-host.
Doug Selwyn. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Barry Davis needs to be a co-host.
Barry Davis, got it.
Laura Crawford.
Okay, Laura.
And Jennifer McKenna.
I think I got Jennifer.
Sandy Eaton, doesn't Sandy need to be a co-host?
I don't know.
Yeah, he has a slide.
I personally have no slides.
Oh, you know, okay, sorry.
Okay, what happened to Laura Crawford? Okay, here's Laura Crawford. Okay, anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we're going to open the breakout rooms. Find your way into your room. I will stay behind in this sort of ante-room, if you will. And for those that can't figure out how to get into the breakout rooms, I will attempt to put you in your desired room. Good luck. We're going to go for 50 minutes. Actually, we're starting 7 minutes late. Maybe we will go for 55. I said 60. We'll go for 55 minutes. No,
I'm sorry, but when I go to the breakout room, I don't see them listed. I only see create breakout rooms.
Haven't opened the rooms yet, so I'm going to open them right now.
Thank you.
So now you should all be invited to join your respective room.
I
Or
don't
to
see a
join
list
a
of
room.
breakouts. Cole, Marcia Goffin, I need Julie Hull, Lori Veninger, Jennifer McKenna. You already have Lara Crawford.
Okay, one at a time. Julie Hall,
Yes. Lori Veninger
Lori,
with a V-E-N.
Cole,
Lori. Oh yeah, I see her. Okay, Lori, where did she go? Okay.
And Jennifer McKenna.
Jennifer.
Cole.
I don't see Jennifer. She may have already joined the breakout. I'm not
Hey,
sure.
Cole,
The
I'm
breakout room thing just
the
showed
chair
up
of a
instantly.
I'm the chair of a breakout and I'm not in the room.
Yeah, me too. It
Okay.
showed up for about 2 seconds. I got assigned to a different breakout group.
All right. So for people who can't figure out how to get into your room, change your name or to the room that you want to be in, so I can more quickly put you in there.
I don't see a list of the rooms.
Yeah.
Cole, yeah.
Well, you had that list when you registered. I will put it in the chat.
Oh.
Is it
How do you
where that is?
is it a fun breakout? Is it number 1?
Well, we're not using numbers. We're using names this time. Where's my chat? 1 second.
And Cole, I'm a
In the
co-host.
chat already.
I'm a co-host, but not leading
into their
the Rural New
breakout
Deal
rooms.
this time, but want to join the Rural New Deal. That's Alan Minsky.
Okay, I'm a simple man. I can only do one thing at a time. So if you can put your request in the chat, that might help. But
Okay.
otherwise, you're going to have to wait for me to deal with one request before dealing with the next one. Okay, I put a list of rooms in the chat.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So Susan, which breakout are you trying
It's a
to
join healthcare, not warfare.
Okay. Susan.
Along with Jonathan.
Okay. Along with Jonathan. Okay. Who else wants to join a breakout?
I do. Kristen Seashore, the Ukraine.
Kristen wants to join Ukraine. Okay.
Carolyn.
Somehow
Alan wants to join the Rural New Deal.
Who wants to?
Alan Minsky.
Alan Minsky.
I'm called now a Rural New Deal, Alan Minsky.
Okay.
So Carolyn Magid, I'd like to be in the Progressive Union, whatever that one is called, Building a Progressive Public Sector Union.
Carolyn?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see you listed here.
My name now says Mass Teachers Association because you said I had to change it. I should change it.
Well,
I'm
I don't
Right.
see
I'm
Mass
gonna-
Teachers Association on the list either.
Okay, I'm going back to my name.
Linda
Yes.
O'Connell,
We'll see
Medicare
who's-
for all.
Linda O'Connell, Medicare.
And Lakshmi Rao, I signed up for environment, something
Yeah, the
about.
signups didn't work, so you have to just tell me now which one you want to join. Forget the signups, they didn't work.
Oh,
Okay, so Lakshmi, which one did you want to join?
and something about environment group, I think it's.
So we had a global climate change, but unfortunately the
Right.
convener is sick and couldn't convene the breakout, so that one has been
Okay, I'll
canceled.
pick something else. Thank you.
Yes, please.
All right.
I'm Carolyn back for the Progressive Education Public Sector Union.
I see Carolyn Maggot speaking. Okay.
Yep.
But why isn't it showing up here? Carolyn. Oh, it's trying to put you in a different one. All right, I'm moving you to Progressive Unions. All right. Okay, who else needs to join the room? Hayat, you are muted. I
Could I get into American Power?
American Power. Okay.
Yeah, this is Lon Herman. I'd like to be put in a rural New Deal.
Okay, who was that
Shop.
speaking? Oh, Lon Herman wants to join Rural New Deal. Okay. Okay. Someone else?
Hi, Cole. This is Subrata. I wanted to be in that American Power also.
Subrata. Okay. Okay, there you go. Anyone else? I'm guessing the other people are away from their computers, but if you are here and wish to join a breakout, speak up. Hello, Paul. Good morning. We have just started a breakout session, so you can choose which breakout you want to be in.
Great. Good morning. Thank you.
Do you see how to enter the rooms or?
Yep. Yeah, I'm looking at the list right now.
Right.
Thank you.
Hello, Lewis. Did you want to join a breakout? You're muted, Lewis. Hello, Michael, you here?
Yeah, I just stepped away. What are we doing? Going to breakout rooms?
Yeah, we just started breakouts, Michael. Did you want to join one?
Sure. I can't remember which I signed up for though.
Signups didn't work, so you'll have to rethink.
Oh,
At least didn't work. They partially worked, but a lot of people didn't get it.
Is there a list of? Hi, Cole. How are you?
I'm good.
Okay, so where do I find it here?
I just put it in the chat, the list of rooms.
Okay. Okay.
I think there may also be a button at the bottom of your screen allowing you to join one, but I can also put you in it.
I'm mainly interested in the housing one this afternoon. Can I?
Oh, hi, Michael. You are a different Michael than I realized I was talking to. I thought the voice was unfamiliar. Now I recognize your voice. Yeah, housing is this afternoon. Yeah.
Okay, I might skip these.
Yep.
Because I'm
it's fine.
Working here in my own. So I just come back at what time?
The afternoon breakouts start at 2:30, so I should log on at 2 o'clock or so.
Okay. And are there other plenaries in between?
Yes, there's a plenary. So there's a video of what is his name? Max Max Frost at 1:20, and then there's a plenary at 1:30 with Sonia Chang Diaz, Harris Grumman, and Tricia Farley Bouvier about learning from successful campaigns. They're each to describe a campaign that was successful.
Yeah, I want to go on that one.
Yeah, so that's 1:30.
Okay, so I should come back at 1:20. In other words.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. And then and then the breakouts after that. Thank you. Cool.
Yeah. All right.
So I just leave this on in the meantime, or
it's up to you. You can hang up and rejoin later, or you could just leave it on.
Yeah, I'll
do you wish.
join at 1. Okay, thank you.
All righty.